Hello and welcome to Round 5 of Grand Prix Dallas-Fort Worth. I'm Nate Price in the booth alongside Jacob Van Lunen, and we have James Searles versus Ben Stark, both fresh off of losses in the last round, here for you in Round 5. Looks like Ben is playing the mono white splashing black deck we'd talked about a couple of times on camera thus far, and looks like James is playing, is this blue-white, similar to the deck we saw played by Huey Jensen in the previous round?
Yep.
All right, so Ben comes out of the gate with a Soldier of the Pantheon, followed up by a Daring Skyjack, and what is likely going to be an attempt at a Dryad Militant after he gets Essence scattered. So a nice aggressive start from Ben. James is on the back foot, manages to scatter to keep himself too far from getting behind, but definitely still needing to find answers to those early aggressive creatures Ben has.
So it looks like James is playing the blue-white deck that we've seen a lot of people moving toward, of course, this weekend.
Do you think the deck is advantaged over playing Esper?
I really couldn't tell you.
Okay.
I wish I could give a better answer.
Oh, that's something to learn this weekend.
Yeah, exactly. It's something we'll have to keep our eyes out for.
Ben gets aggressive, activating his Mutavault and sending all of his creatures sideways for a reasonable sized chunk out of James's life total. 1/3 of it evaporating down to 12 life left. I know that Ben was talking earlier about the mana base of his deck. Talked to him last night about it, and he's really, really loving those Temples of the Silence. The Scry is effectively like an extra card in his deck. It allows him to thin things out and make sure that once he hits the number of lands that he needs, he doesn't draw too many more. All right, we see a Jace Architect of Thought, which is almost immediately negated by a Spear of Heliod.
It's pretty good.
Allows his creatures to get in and knock Jace down to 1 to loyalty.
Spear is such a strong card. One of the things I really like about Oren and Ben's deck here is that he doesn't have to play a lot of copies of Spear, so he's not going to get he's not going to get Spear Flood, if you will.
Got it. Spear Flood. I like that.
It's never going to draw more than one Spear.
So James goes ahead and ticks up his Jace before playing a new copy of Jace and ticking it up as well, effectively dropping Ben's attack to, I guess it would be a mere potential 3-point attack if he decides to send the Mutavault.
4.
4? Okay, there's a second Mutavault. So still knocks it down to 1, but manages to keep the second copy safe.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, he's spending cards, and he's not really doing much, whereas Ben is not spending cards, and he's also not doing much because of the Jaces. But still, I mean,
having 2 copies of Mutavault when you've got a Spear in play is also incredibly resilient if your opponent does manage to resolve a Supreme Verdict, which is something that James is going to have to do relatively soon if he wants to dig himself out of this spot.
I mean, it's easier said than done, though, because it only gets half the damage off the board if you Supreme Verdict. And
exactly. All right, Ben's got to decide exactly how much he wants to send at that Jace, knowing full well that James could have some removal spells in order to nullify the attack. It looks like he's sending 3 of his creatures in at Jace, and the 4th one, the one that can't be bounced by Azorius Charm, at James.
I think it's just the opposite, actually. I think
it's the other way around?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think the Soldier is going at the Jace, and the 2 Mutavaults and the Militant are going to James' face.
That would make perfect sense. I mean, can't get rid of an attacker going at Jace. Make sure that Jace definitely dies and gets in a few damage at the same time.
Really good split there.
Yep.
So James going to fall down to 6 here, I believe. Yeah. When he finds a detention sphere, he could use that to deal with that spear, get it off the table.
That he does. Passes the turn.
It's interesting that that Ben didn't replay the Mutavault that last turn. Oh, never mind. It went on the top of his deck.
Yeah.
I was thinking it got bounced for some reason.
Okay,
Yeah.
and looks like it was still lethal in play. Yeah, 3/2 powered creatures, and if he didn't have another card, yeah. So.
Yep.
All right, and so Ben Stark manages to take down the first game against James Searles.
It looks like Ben is bringing a whole bunch of cards here. You know, against these Supreme Verdict decks, you really can't have too much fodder that just dies.
Yeah.
In the early turns, like for example, like a card like Burrows Elite that might be awesome in matchups where your opponent doesn't have a lot of spot removal, or or even when they do have a lot of spot removal and you're just able to run them over.
Yeah.
Against a deck like this, that's really not your plan. You want to have a couple quick threats, and then you want to just play your threats slowly over time so that you don't get blown out.
So it looks like he does have a few good cards to bring in. I mean, the Dark Betrayals and Doomblades are clearly for different decks. But
Yes.
this couple copies of Zathrid Necromancer to bolster the two that he's already got in his main deck are very clearly going to come in.
Yeah, they're huge here.
Sin Collector also seems very important in this matchup, as well
Sin
as
Collector
those
is
Thought
about
Seizes.
as good as it gets here, yeah.
So what's the purpose of the Orzhov Charm in this deck, other than to act as a removal spell? What all does it do for this deck?
So, I mean, this is a deck where all of the modes of Orzhov's Charm are pretty live.
Okay.
Having a removal spell like Orzhov Charm is really good because one of the issues with playing removal spells in decks like this, decks that play cards like Spear, is that, I mean, this keeps coming up today, but it's a card that does not advance your board state. And for a deck like this, like, you need to have a threat. If you don't have one in play already, you need to put one into play on your turn, or you basically just lose on the spot. And a card like Orzhov Charm, even though it is a removal spell, a pretty good removal spell, if you don't have a threat in play, you can use Orzhov Charm and make a threat.
True.
In a deck like this. So that makes it pretty good. The other thing is that removal spells are just really, really good with Precinct Captain.
Mm-hmm.
Precinct Captain, really good card in general, but when you have cards like Spear and Orzhov Charm and Brave the Elements and Banisher Priest,
Yeah.
It's really easy to start making tokens with that Precinct Captain, and you'd be surprised how hard it is to beat somebody who's churning out tokens with that, especially when they have a Spear.
Believe that. So there's Profit Loss in his sideboard as well. That's another card that seems interesting. Do you think there's a card that makes it in? I mean, he doesn't have a lot to remove, but you get a window of opportunity against an Elspeth to kill all of those guys and get your own. Am I thinking of the right card, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess you can wipe their board of Elspeth tokens. It's pretty good anti-Elspeth card.
Worth bringing in, or not considering what you'd have to take out to make the space?
I don't know if I would bring it in, but I might. Like if I had time to test this deck a bit. I've played with most decks in Standard, but I've not played with this deck.
Well,
obviously,
this gets to be a fun learning experience for us then. I'm glad we got to see this exact matchup, too. I'll be interested to see the mono-white deck in a few other matchups over the course of the weekend, but these are two of the decks that I'm most curious about because I've got a good background of watching the mono-white deck play. But this blue-white deck, it's a fairly new commodity as far as I'm concerned. So getting to see how it handles some of these other decks. And these are two perfect examples of decks that are poised. They've been kind of sitting on the fringe of like major success and just haven't broken through yet. And so this is a good showcase for these two decks and an opportunity to play against. I mean, playing against this blue-white deck is going to be analogous to playing against the Esper deck, which is another major deck in the field. And playing against this mono-white deck is akin to playing against some of the other like creature-based devotion decks in the format. So you get kind of a good example of how these decks are going to play out against various other strong archetypes in the format. Let's take a look over at James's decks. This is actually just a proxy of the match that we hope we get an opportunity to see last round when Oren Beasley was playing against Cuneo, but they finished their match a little fast, and so we didn't get an opportunity to talk to them.
Yeah, well, actually, James' list is quite a bit different than Kunios.
Wanna
James
talk
has
through the
4
differences.
copies of Last Breath in his main deck. He doesn't have any divinations, quickens, none of that. So he's tapping out more often. But Last Breath is very good in this format. I mean, it's a 2-mana instant speed card that kills Night Veil Spectre. The 4 life is pretty irrelevant when you're playing a deck like Blue-White Control.
Yeah.
And I mean, pretty much every single one of your opponents, except hard control opponents, are going to have targets.
Yep.
Their Last Breath. And even those decks are usually going to have Mutavault. So.
Yep. I mean, it's very good in this matchup, especially. It seems like it hits all but one of the creatures in Ben's deck. I think the only one that it doesn't hit is the Skyjack.
Yeah, I mean, it even exiles the Necromancer.
Which is insane, considering how strong we've been talking about that card being against cards like Supreme Verdict, which is another incredibly relevant card in this matchup. So I want to talk to you really quickly about a card that I have been incredibly high on and actually have been trying to convince people to run a one of in their control deck mains. Is this Pithing Needle right here in the sideboard. I'm super big on that card right now. It's very, very strong in like this particular matchup, actually. It's less important. I mean, you get to stop the Mutavaults out of Ben's deck, which is very important.
It is very important,
but
actually.
It's very good against the mono black deck, which you were talking about being one of the major, if not the best deck in the format. All of the cards that card gets to stop. Pithing Needle just seems like it does, over time against all the planeswalkers. It's hard to find a deck that it doesn't do something relevant against.
That's definitely true. It is a hard card to include in your main deck, though, because your opponent plays a mountain on turn 1, and you just want to smash your face into the table. It's
so you just play it like shrug. Well, it looks like Ben is starting off with a quick Soldier of the Pantheon, getting off to a nice early start, as you would hope that his deck is going to do if it's going to have a chance to survive. We do see a matching Soldier of the Pantheon from James. He also has a Supreme Verdict, a Fiendslayer Paladin, and an Elspeth in his hand. So we know that he's got some middle game and some late game covered, assuming he can get to them.
Interesting. So no block there from James. I'm surprised. I would have thought that he would have just snap blocked there.
What reason could you think of that he wouldn't want to do that?
Maybe he just thinks that if he leaves it in play, like maybe does he have multicolor cards in his hand that he's going to be casting and getting some life with? Gaining life is definitely more relevant for him than it is for Ben. So that half of
seems kind of self-defeating at that point, though. All right, so gets to attack him with the Precinct Captain. James goes ahead and takes it, allowing Ben to put a token into play. Do you think that tips to Ben at all what potentially is going to be coming up in the near future? It's kind of hard to expect anything other than a verdict coming up.
Yeah, I think he's got to expect the Supreme Verdict. I mean, I don't think Ben is going to play another creature into this board.
Knowing that was possible. Well, he did.
You know what, though? I should take that back because, to be fair, I mean, at that point, Ben wasn't even really winning on the board.
Good point.
So,
right.
And I mean, James not aggressively trading these creatures, it's just making his verdict worse. Like, he has creatures in play.
Now, this is true.
And I'm sure Ben will be happy to just block the Soldier with his token.
And get a card parity out of it, effectively.
It seems very good. 18 all. New life totals. And then will we see a verdict? We do see a verdict, okay. Ooh, and Ben, double Mutavaults.
Strong. Very powerful card.
It is a very powerful card.
All right. Ben reloads his board with a couple of 2-1s.
Yep.
Dryad Militant surprisingly strong in this matchup, considering the Elixir of Immortalities. Getting an opportunity to deny James an opportunity to put some of his better cards back in his deck seems like it's something that could potentially be relevant as long as this game goes. So we see another Fiendslayer Paladin, and there's the first of all the last breaths. This time I didn't call it Last Whisper. I was smart and reminded that I was incorrect. All right, so Elspeth hits the table. First of her soldiers have joined her. Her soldiers look strangely like her.
They do. That's weird.
Yeah. Then again, in a format filled with a mechanic called Devotion, I guess there are worse things that could possibly be represented.
And mimicry is, what is it? The
Imitation's the highest form of flattery?
Yes, exactly. There you go.
I knew the saying you were going for. All right, looks like Elspeth's going to do it. Ben packs it in, so that James manages to even the game at 1 apiece. Elspeth, man. Elspeth is going to be so hard to deal with.
Elspeth is a very good card. I mean, there we saw that, Ben being on the draw and not really out of the gates that fast. Or I guess he did come out of the gates pretty quickly, but James had a Soldier of the Pantheon of his own. Yeah. And then just started chaining Fiendslayer Paladins. So how he drew a lot of sideboard cards, a Supreme Verdict, and an Elspeth.
So tell me about siding in these creatures. Siding in 3 Soldier of the Pantheon, 3 Fiendslayer Paladin, is just those providing a way to interact with the early stage of the game in order to set yourself up for a Supreme Verdict. Why do you bring those in?
They just let you trade early. I mean, it's hard to win when you get run over, especially against these Mutavault decks.
I agree.
When they go turn 1, 2-power guy, turn 2, 3-power guy, turn 3 spear, attack you. Okay, you Supreme Verdict me? Okay, attack you with my Mutavaults.
Yeah.
It's tough. And Soldier of the Pantheon lets you just trade.
Yeah. Sometimes that's all you need is a warm body.
And also, it affects the way your opponent plays the game.
How so?
Well, I mean, it's a card that's going to force them to overcommit in a lot of spots because, one, it gains you life, and a lot of players are more apt to put more onto the table if their opponent's at a higher life total because they feel like there's a rush to reduce their life total to 0.
Right.
It can often block things indefinitely that are much larger than itself, that are multicolored, and in doing so, it forces your opponent to play more than one thing that is expensive and powerful, which again makes your Supreme Verdict better. So I feel like both of these cards with their protection abilities force people to play into Supreme Verdict in many spots.
Not too bad. I mean, especially like when you're the deck that's playing Sphinx's Revelation also, making those early 1-for-1 trades is less detrimental, right? Because you always have the ability to fill up more against an opponent who doesn't have the same option that you've got.
Yeah, playing a lot of cheap things that can trade 1-for-1, especially things that cost 1, is very, very, very good if you're playing a lot of Sphinx's Revelations.
I think that's one of the main ideas behind the Esper deck, right? You don't mind playing a lot of those 1-for-1s because you're ultimately going to recoup the card advantage later.
Yeah, I mean, Sphinx's Revelation is
a format-defining card, would you say?
Pretty ridiculous card. Yeah. It is everything and more.
Yeah.
So
why don't you tell me about let's look at the rest of the cards in James's sideboard. We've got those Archangels of Thune.
Ooh, interesting. So those both combo pretty nicely with the Soldier of the Pantheon and the Fiendslayer Paladin.
It's likely coming in as a package.
Yeah, I mean, the cool interaction between those two cards is when the Soldier of the Pantheon's trigger goes off, it puts Pulseful Song counter on your whole team if you have Archangel of Thune in play.
Strong.
In my testing for Pro Tour Theros, I had a game where I attacked my buddy Tank with a bunch of creatures, including a Soldier of the Pantheon, and I had cast Archangel of Thune pre-combat, and he needed to cast Azorius Charm to survive the attack, but if he cast Azorius Charm, the attack became lethal again because the rest of my team got bigger. So there are some fun tricks.
Awesome. So Pithing Needle we talked about a little bit. Good against Planeswalkers, good against Mutavault, good against like the occasional other activated abilities. I mean, not bad against Thassa. You can always find something that it's going to come in against. But again, space is awfully tight in this deck a lot of times, and finding a room for that extra card, especially if your opponent's not going to be playing something where it's a relevant card.
I mean, even well, even this deck, there are things that one could needle, but if they're going to be playing needle, then it's pretty unlikely they're going to want to, because they're probably going to have Architect and Sun's Champion in their own deck also.
Right. So
Guess you could always needle that Elixir.
yeah. No, probably
Probably
not.
don't want to do that.
So James is also packing negates and gainsays. Those are definitely for other. I mean, the negates and gainsays very strong in the blue-white to the Sphinx's Revelation mirror matchup. We'll call gainsay gaining a little bit of added benefit against the mono blue matchup. Sundering Growth. What's that generally brought in against?
Well, I mean, it exiles, right?
Sundering Growth?
Sundering Growth.
Does it? Thought it was.
Is it destroy?
I think it's just destroy and populate, right?
Oh, it's just destroy? Huh. Sundering Growth. Okay, so I'm not really sure what he's planning on.
I mean, he does need a way to stop opposing Pithing Needles. Like, they're really good against his deck, right? Plus, most of those decks also have Detention Spheres, which it's reasonable against. I mean, I could see you potentially bringing it in against Mono Black, because getting rid of their source of card advantage is highly advantageous to you. So
yeah, I mean, dealing with underworld connections, it's really important.
I love talking to Brad Nelson about that deck and that card in particular. He told me that he thinks it's better than Sphinx's Revelation in this format. So
yeah, I played underworld connections in my main deck of the Pro Tour, and everybody called me crazy. Now everybody does it.
Yeah, I mean, jock on your style.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was BBD's idea, to be fair.
I mean, what has he ever done with that card?
Yeah. He won the Grand Prix the next week.
Oh, yeah, my mistake. All right, looks like Ben gets off to a nice early start again. This time going with a Dryad Militant, and I believe that's an Imposing Sovereign. Imposing Sovereign taps opponents' creatures when they come into play, is that right?
Yeah, all of your opponent's creatures are going to come into play tapped.
Even Elspeth's tokens?
Correct.
Interesting.
It's not just creature cards, it's creatures in general. So
that's a nice card, and it was one that was like very loose comparisons to Thalia, Garden of Thraben, who like we know is just a bonkers powerful card at this point. Were made when she was first previewed. I think Brian David Marshall is the one who got her as a preview card and showed us a little bit about what she could do. So James goes ahead and uses that last breath to get rid of a Mutavault, serving two purposes, both removing an attacker that doesn't die to Supreme Verdict and also hindering Stark's mana development. Very, very crucial turn. We'll see how that actually plays out. And he's got another copy of Last Breath in his hand, as well as two copies of Supreme Verdict. So looks like he's set up fairly well, though I don't know if he's got a fourth land in his hand to go with. Looks like a Jace double Supreme Verdict in his hand. Oh, yeah, he does. So there's a Hallowed Fountain. So, man, it's a fairly strong hand from James there.
It's a really, really good hand.
I mean, he's dropped down to 10, but he's going to be able to assume control of this game very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, Ben can play another 4 points of power next turn, and he's threatening to then make it to even more power as the game progresses.
And Jace comes down, does what he does best, ticking up to both save him and also potentially save James. Very likely is going to force Ben to commit even more into the potential Supreme Verdict that's coming up. A third copy, yeah. Can't imagine the board doesn't get swept here, yeah.
Yep, and
just like that.
James gets a very nice 3-for-1 there. And Profit Loss did come in here for Ben.
Profit Loss also seems like it's a reasonable way to get around Jace's +1 ability. So if you absolutely need to get in to kill Jace, it gives you the opportunity to.
Interesting. So here he can play a Spear, which really is just the best card in his hand by a pretty big margin. All right. Soldier of the Pantheon gets Essence Scattered.
Looks like he was trying to build up for Spear on the next turn, try to make that attack in more, not entirely lethal for Jace, but at least make things difficult. This looks like a tight spot for Stark here, although that Precinct Captain is going to make things better, considering he's got the spear in his hand. All right, Revelation for 3 is going to put James a little bit further out of the danger zone and give him a few more cards in his hand as well.
Yeah, so James continuing to draw more lands. Hitting those land drops so important for the Esper deck. The first 6 are really the most important of all, but
once you get up to the ability to cast Elspeth and Sphinx's Revelation for 3, you're pretty much golden. All right, so Spear comes down, but as we discussed earlier, it comes down without a friend to hold it, so it's kind of a paltry-looking weapon at that point.
Yeah, I mean, this is here we're looking at more than one copy of Prophet Loss in Ben's hand, and Prophet Loss doesn't attack.
Not at all.
So that's what we were talking about with Orzhov Charm earlier. One of the reasons why that card is so good in this deck is because a lot of the time you just need something that can attack.
Yeah.
You need a warm body.
I'd be perfectly happy with those cards being 2/1s coming back out of his graveyard, right?
And it's been hard for people to find warm bodies here in Dallas. It's probably because of how cold it is outside.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, James continues to crack back with his Mutavault, taking the slow road to victory. Again, because of the weather. All right, is that a Necromancer that Ben just drew?
He's had the Necromancer for a bit.
He has played a Temple of Silence, so he's at least got the black mana to cast it, but not looking to play it yet.
He does have that temple there, but...
All right, Jace goes ultimate, so...
so he's starting himself there.
An upgrade into a different Planeswalker. All right, so Elspeth Sun's Herald comes down. I'm assuming with a very, very quick 3 counters to go alongside it. And what's he going to grab out of Ben's deck?
Huh.
You get any card, right? Grab himself a spear to go along with his 1/1s, and also give him just an immense amount of backup.
I think Necromancer might be really, really good.
Yeah. Elspeth only makes soldiers, right? Not humans.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
They're just soldiers. They are not humans.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be the spear. All right, Elspeth now makes 2/2s, and he's got the ability to kill anything that Ben manages to actually slip through the line of defense. It's a pretty strong setup for him. I mean, you usually find yourself with a pretty strong setup after you resolve a Jace ultimate. I must admit, I don't see Jace Architect of Thought Ultimate all that frequently. Like the last time that I saw it was actually during the Community Cup when it was combined with Doubling Season to go and get another copy out of your deck and then something else, so you could just chain Jace activations.
I liked the Iron Chef.
Oh yeah,
thing that they did.
Yeah,
that was great. This game is kind of running away in James' favor at this point.
Yeah.
So maybe this white-black deck is not all it's cracked up to be.
Or maybe this blue-white deck just is. Like, this is 4 consecutive games we've seen, or I guess, 4 consecutive games. Well, I guess the last game. 4 games that we've seen from it that have been fairly one-sided, just runaways. And it's not like the opponent has just rolled over and died either. Like, there have been actual attempts to try to win the match, and it just hasn't.
Well, part of that is... just the symptom of playing a control deck too. I mean, if the games you win are not going to look close.
Yeah.
You're just going to, Revelation for like 9 and the game will last for another 12 turns. But the game really ends when you cast that big Revelation.
You can see there over Ben's shoulder the Spectre of Josh Shutter Layton